Hello guys, and welcome to another Blender tutorial. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to make an abstract fracture animation. We're not doing a simulation. This is going to be all animated by hand, but it's super simple and the whole process really is very beginner friendly. So I would definitely say this is okay for beginners as long as you know the basics of Blender. Now I'm going to be making this blend file available on my Patreon. And if you guys want to check out some of my Skillshare courses that I've recently made, you can go ahead in the description below, go to my Skillshare stuff. It's all going to be down there if you guys want to check it out. But enough of that said, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial and definitely show me what you guys make when you're done with it. So with the default startup scene in a Blender, we're just going to hit A to select everything and then X and just go delete. So we're going to delete also default objects. We're then going to go to our add option by going Shift A, and let's just go over to the circle options. Let's just add in a circle and let's just tab into edit mode. And what we're going to do is we're going to just select the circle off to the side here. So in my front view, it'll just be this one here. So if you hit 1 on your number pad to go into front view, just make sure to select this vertex here to your left. And once you have it active, you're going to go Control I or Command I. That's just going to inverse the selection. You're going to hit X and delete. So all you're left with is this one single vertex here. And then we're simply going to go over to our modifiers, and let's just use the screw modifier to simplify this workflow. So we're going to go over down here under the generators, and let's go to the screw modifier. So here you can see it's wrapping it all around here, and here you can see it's 360 degrees, which is what you would expect for a circle. And here's the iterations, and here's the steps, all that sort of stuff. But let's just start with extruding the vertex up on the Z. So with that vertex active, we're going to go into our front orthographic view, and we're going to go E to extrude. And we're just making the foot of a glass, so don't overthink it. Just go up something like this. E to extrude a little bit and just make a foot. So if you want to go online and look at some references, feel free to do that. But for me, I'm going to really just keep this as simple as possible. Okay, so we're just doing this in our front orthographic view. So let's just go up maybe like that. You don't have to make it too high. It doesn't really matter because we're going to be seeing the top primarily. So I'm just hitting E, by the way, and then clicking. You could probably use some of the draw tools to do this as well, but just make a glass shape. You can make it whatever you want. There's many different styles of glasses out there, but I'm just going to maybe make that a little bit smaller. So you can see there, that looks pretty cool. I think I might just go back in edit mode and just increase the size of this foot a little bit. Okay, that looks a little bit better. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to also select this bottom vert, and let's just give it a fill in here. So we're going to go E to extrude and then Z or X. So we're going to extrude actually on X, so E and then X, and then E, X again. And we want to get it close to there, but let's come over here and just enable merge. And if we go G, X, and just move it close, just till it kind of just touches, okay? And we want to just merge. Don't go too much, but it should automatically merge if it's really close. And we're not going to use a solidify modifier. So let's just select the first vertex at the top here. Just hit Z, go into wireframe, and once again, I am in my front orthographic. Let's give this some simple thickness. I'm just going to go E to extrude, and then E to extrude back down. And I'm just kind of following the previous vertex extrusions on the outside. Really, guys, don't overthink it, just keep it simple. And as you start getting to the base here, you want to kind of start thickening it a little bit, because this is kind of what you'd see in real life in a glass. And then just extrude till that point touches there, and there you have it. So you have a little bit of thickness in the base. And let's just go now and give that a subdivision surface modifier. And let's tab out into object mode again, and look at that, it looks pretty cool. So let's go over to our screw and just apply it. So we've applied it, and let's go back to edit mode. Let's just test to see if we select the bottom vertex, if that is actually just one single vertex, that's all merged properly, and then select this one down the bottom, and that's all good as well. Cool, so now we're also going to have to think about applying our subdivision surface modifier. So if you're happy with the current subdivision level, go ahead and keep it. I'm just going to bump mine up to 2. It's a bit of a nicer look. And if if you're afraid about applying this modifier and then you want to go back and make changes, just do a duplication by going Shift D and then just move that duplication to a new collection. So if you need to go back, you can just, you have nothing to lose. But for me, I'm pretty confident in this. So I'm just going to go to the drop down. I'm going to apply it. Okay. So now we have our glass here. And by the way, if we're going to be doing self fracture stuff, if you've really scaled this in object object mode by any amount, just make sure to go Control A and just apply it at scale. That's going to be important. So let's go Shift A and let's quickly add in a plane. And let's just grab the glass itself. Let's go S and just scale it down just a bit till it's about that scale to the plane. Then we'll go Control A and apply to scale, just so we kind of have a rough idea of what my scene scale is here. And yes, you could use the measurement tools, but we don't have to be that precise. Just kind of roughly have it like this. We're then going to grab the plane down here and just scale it up a little bit. And now let's grab this glass and let's hit F3 and let's type in here cell. So just C-E-L-L and just click on the quick cell fracture. And oh yeah, by the way, if you want kind of like a double material effect where it's got one material on the outside, but inside of the cracks it has another material, we actually have to, before we do the cell fracture, so let's just quickly just hit escape. Let's just quickly go to our materials. This is important. So select the glass and just go over here to your materials and let's just call this outer. And then let's just click the plus again and let's call this material inner. Okay, make sure that the outer material is on top of the inner. So the top one is going to be the one that's outside and the inner material is going to be the one that's inner. So let's select the glass again. It has those two materials. And now if we hit F3 again, just type in cell, go to the cell fracture. And now we can just simply come down here to this mesh data option and just bump this material up by a value of 1. And now we're going to be able to have that automatically happen. So as far as the actual simulation here, I'd like to set the source limit to 120. The bigger you put that, the smaller the particles. I don't want to go too small because I kind of think bigger chunks work for this. It gives us, it's a bit more visually pleasing, but completely up to you. If you want to put a little bit of noise, I went to something like 0.1. I'm not going to go over all the details here, but I do like to just leave the random as it is here. The source limit I'm not going to really touch. Really, you could just leave it as default, but just taking that source limit up to 120 is the main thing and adding a little bit of noise. So if we now go ahead and click OK, it's just going to do this thing here. Don't touch anything. It's just going to take a few seconds. And once it's all done, you're going to see it's going to have your original model left behind, but it's going to now have all these little fragments that you can use. And there you see, it's just happened like this now. Now you can see we have a ton of these little pieces here, right? Now while we have them active, so if you hit G, you can see they're all active by default after the simulation. Just quickly hit the M key on your keyboard, click New Collection, and let's just call it frac for fracture bits. Okay, so just go ahead and click OK. And now if we go over here to the top of our collection, just come to the frac layer and just drop it down so it's a bit smaller. And now we can remove that out of the way, right? So we can hide those fragments. But let's select the original here, which we could use later again if we wanted to do another simulation. Let's just hit M, go New Collection. Let's just call it old or junk, whatever, and just go OK. And then come here and just untick it. We don't need to see it. So let's go to our frac and bring that back. So these are all our little fragments. And remember I was telling you about the materials. You can't really notice it, but if you go to your, click on any one of these shards, go to the outer material, and let's just quickly go down to our viewport display. And let's just give it a color, just so you can see the difference. And if I were to actually select one of these and just move it out, you can see in the inside, we now have that second inner material. So I'm just going to click on the inner, and just as a viewport display, I'm just going to make it red so you can kind of just see it easily. Okay, so that's kind of what we have there. Now, those materials are in place, and we've done our fracture operation, simulation thing, whatever you want to call it. So now let's add up a little camera before we get into animating out our little shards. So you can just find any position that you like in the scene and then just go Shift A and just go to your camera options, add in a camera. And you guys already know how it works. If you have a camera, just hit Control 0 or Command 0 to go into that camera that's active. And with the active camera, if you hit G and then click your middle mouse button and just move your mouse back, you can zoom, hit G to pan, double tap R to rotate on the spot. You guys kind of already should understand that. So just placing our camera about here, go to your output settings and let's make it 1080 by 1080. And I like to go here to my focal length or my camera settings, and I like to change the focal length to 125. That's going to give us that very shallow view, but that's kind of what we want to go for. And if you need to, just with your camera active, hit G, middle mouse button, and just zoom it out just a bit more. So completely up to you how you want to approach that, but something like this looks pretty cool. Make sure to save as you go, right? Because anything could happen. So now let's do a little bit of animation. So let's just go to our end frame value. I'm going to go with 110 frames, and this is not a loopable animation. I didn't feel the need to make it loopable. If you guys want to do that, feel free to do it. So I'm going to select a few shards. So I'm going to go maybe over to frame 1. And I'm just going to select a few shards. I don't want to select them all at the same time because I want it to be a little bit random. So just select a few. So I'm going to select about 3 of them. And on frame 1, I'm going to hit I, and I'm going to insert a location and rotation keyframe. And then I'm going to come to frame 50. And I'm going to go to my top view, and I'm going to go G and just move them out. And then I'm going to individually select some of them and just spread them apart. And then just double tap R and just give them a bit of random rotation. Okay, like that. And then make sure they're active, all 3 of them. Come to frame 50, hit I again, location rotation. Now, let's go to frame 0, hit the spacebar, and you can see we have that. Okay, and in fact, let's just grab this keyframe with those 3 still active and just go G and just move it to 90. I think that slower look is a little bit better. Cool. Now grab some more random ones. Okay, maybe these ones here. Hit I, maybe in frame 20, hit I, insert a location rotation, and let's come to frame 100. Go to the top and then G, just move them out, and then just individually select these ones, move them out a bit, like so. Don't be afraid of a little bit of rotation. That's kind of cool. And make sure you know which ones that were. So it's this one, this one. Okay, so this one, and this one. And I think this one here. Okay, so those were the secondary ones. And then frame 100, we're going to hit I and insert a location and rotation keyframe. So now they kind of follow shortly after. So let's have a look at that. Go to frame 0, hit this spacebar, and let's see that animation. Okay, cool. So the timing of that is looking really good. So let's just now select all of these shards here. So all of them together. And let's just go to the very last frame, which is frame 110. And let's just move them out just a slight little bit and hit I, insert location rotation. So just have that little bit of, okay, that looks kind of weird. So just with them all active, just select that end one, hit X and delete keyframe. So I don't think we need that. So let's just keep selecting random bits. So I'm going to select maybe some of these ones here, maybe some ones here. And then I'm going to go to frame 30. I'm going to hit I, insert a location and rotation keyframe. And let's come over to frame 85 and go to your top view. And then you can just kind of move these ones out randomly. But make sure you keep note of which ones they are. Okay, so these are going to be the third ones that come out. And make sure to give them a little bit of rotation. Something like that to keep things exciting. And that looks good. So now select those guys. So have them all active, and frame 85, we're going to hit I and insert a location and a rotation. So now let's have a look at that. So we have our first ones, secondary ones, and then those third ones kind of came out. Okay, and you can kind of layer that up as much as you want. Just make sure you kind of keep track of what's what and what's happening. So I'm also going to select some of these ones on the inside. And I'm going to go to frame 23, just a little bit of an offset. I'm going to hit I, insert location rotation, come over to frame 110, and I'm going to move them back. Move one up. Be creative with it. Just move them out, rotate them like so. Make sure you select them on frame 110, then hit I and insert a location and rotation. So let's go over to frame 0 and go into our camera view, hit the spacebar, and look at that. Pretty cool. Now this, looks a little bit stiff towards the end. It's not very fluid. So what you could do is you can select individual ones and kind of offset them individually, just so they don't all kind of start exactly at the same time. And that kind of little bit of random offset will really help make things look a little bit more pleasing visually. So that's a cool little trick, and you don't have to use any sort of constraints to do this procedurally, which you could do, and I have done it like that, but this kind of way is just, relatively easy way of kind of doing the same thing. And it's beginner friendly, so just randomly making little shards go out like that. Okay, so once you have your animation in place, make sure to save, and then we're just going to get into some of our lighting and camera stuff. So let's just once again just select our camera, And let's just move it just a little bit more center. And we want this camera to focus onto a point. So we're going to go Shift A, and we're just going to add in an empty. And let's just go G, Z, move it up, and then S to scale it. And let's just bring it a little bit forward. So about there. Then we're going to select our camera, and let's just go to our constraints, add object constraints, and let's just go to track 2. Click on an eyedropper, and then select that empty. So now if we select the empty and we move it, you can see that camera only follows the empty. So we can go to frame 0 with the camera active. We can hit I and insert a location keyframe for the camera. Then we can go to frame 110, and with the camera still active, we're going to go G and just move it up like this. And G, middle mouse button, and just move it in, and then hit I and insert a location keyframe. So what we're going to have is this sort of thing happening. Okay, pretty cool. And another cool thing about having that there, you can select your camera, and you can't really see it right now, but if you go to camera settings and you enable depth of field, go to the drop down, and you select that empty as a reference object, you can then come to the f-stop and make it something low, like 0.7, and it'll be sharp where that empty is, but focused, out of focus in different regions, which kind of adds to the appealing effect of this animation. So now that all that's in place, let's just obviously go to our render engine, and I'm going to be rendering in EV, so I'm going to, or cycles, so I'm going to change it to cycles. And if you have a GPU, make sure to use it, but you can do it on a CPU. It'll just take a little bit longer. And we're just going to go over to our undersampling, denoising. So if you have Blender 3.0, which I recommend you should have, just go to blender.org, you can get it there. Probably still under experimental, last time I checked, but it is stable enough. So you're just going to go under denoising, click on render, and let's just change that to optics. So this denoiser is really going to help us, so we don't have to set our render samples up to something crazy. So even the default 128 should give you relatively decent results, but I would still recommend maybe 200 at least, and then putting the denoising on top of that. But that's going to be much more processor intensive. It's going to be a longer render time. So do keep that in mind. So for the tutorial's sake, I'm just going to keep it at 128. But as a general rule, the higher you set that, the more you're going to be looking at render times. But with newer versions of Cycles, like Cycles X, those times are coming down quite drastically. Okay, so enough has been said. Make sure to save. So we've got our engine there established. Let's add in some lights. So we're going to go Shift A, and let's just go to our lights and add in an area light. G, Z, move that area light up, and I like to go with a strength or a power of 90 watts, and I'm going to just increase the size of it to about 2 meters. And I know this isn't real world scale, so don't worry about it. But I'm now going to go Shift D to duplicate the light, move one over to here, so kind of just off to the side of the camera. If you go to your top orthographic view by hitting 7, just kind of like coming in from like almost a 45 from where this is. Then Shift D, bring another one over here, rotate it in, and if you get 0 to go into camera view, then Control B, so Control B will allow you to click and make a limit the rendering to the camera viewport. And now if you hit Z and you go rendered, you can see here that's our lighting. So it's looking pretty cool. So what I'm going to do is just go to my world as well, and just make sure that the world color here is more in the mid-range with the value there. And we'll mess around with the lighting in a little bit, but let's just select our floor, right? Let's just go over to our shading workspace, and let's just go new, give that a material. Let's just call that floor. And just so we can kind of get a bit of a contrast, so if we go over here, hit Z, go rendered, let's just give our floor a black color here. And let's just make it metallic. I think that really lends itself to this, and just bring that roughness down. Okay, maybe I'll make the color not quite as dark, just more like a darker kind of grayish value for now. But we'll mess around with that a little bit while. It's more just to give us that darker contrast in the background, so we can kind of see the magic happening with our material. So let's select any one of these shards that have those two materials. And let's start with the outer, and always make sure to save when you're working at this stage. So this gold material that I made is very fun. So we're going to go Shift A, search, type in noise, and let's just plug in the color into the base color of our principled. And let's just make the scale here 21. And what we're going to do is we're going to select the noise texture and go Control T or Command T. And it's going to add in these two extra nodes for us. If you don't have that feature, you have to enable Node Wrangler. So go to Preferences, and just go over here and just type in node and make sure to enable your Node Wrangler add-on, and then hitting Control T or Command T with the noise texture enabled, or selected, will give you automatically these 2 extra nodes. We're going to take the object and plug it into the vector, and now that's the way we want to distribute it. Okay, we can mess around with the scale in a bit, but at the moment this color doesn't look right, so let's go Shift A, search, type in color, and let's use a color ramp and place it on this cable here. And now we can use the values here to make 2 colors. So I'm going to grab the white value, drag it down. Let's give it a slightly yellowish color. And then I'm going to drag this one up here, and it's too dark, so I'm going to make it a bit lighter in value and make it yellowish, kind of orange golden as well. Okay. Now this isn't us trying to be physically accurate with the properties of gold. We're just trying to create a cool look. We're then going to go to the metallic slider here, drag it up, and then drag that roughness value down. So at the moment you might think, well, that's still not looking that fantastic, and I agree. So you can always just mess around with those values a little bit. And if you like the way this looks, that's okay. But what I like to do is just add a little bit of bump. So I'm going to move these nodes over, Shift A, search, type in color, get yourself another color ramp, and then plug the color into here. Shift A, search, and type in bump. Grab the bump and then plug the color into your height. Plug the normal into the normal input of your principled shader, and then bring that strength all the way down to 0.1. Okay, we don't want to go too crazy on the strength. And then you can bring up the contrast by bringing these 2 value sliders closer together. And that gives you this kind of nice looking gold material, if you will. Okay, mess around with it, look at references. I just think that looks cool, so I'm going to go with it. So go Control S to save. And now let's make that inner material. And the inner material is quite simple. We're just going to go over here to our transmission, make it all the way up to 1. Bring our roughness down to a very low value. Click on our base color, and I like going to make it slightly bluish. That's something I like, but you guys can totally make it what you want to do. I just like that contrast. So there we have our materials. Now, you can take your lights and you can duplicate them, and I think putting them at the back here a little bit just to kind of give a bit of rim lighting is something that really adds to this as well. But just, experiment with your lights. And you guys know I don't usually spend too much time on doing lighting tutorials, but I sometimes like to make them point lights and bring down the radius and then kind of use them that way. But this is one of those things where really you're going to have to look at some different lighting styles out there, maybe go to Pinterest or something, and then see what you want to do. Maybe you can read some of the rules of different kind of lighting. There's portrait lighting, and then there's lighting where it's more lit from the back. So there's not any one thing I can tell you about lighting, but for me, just having these basic lights at the front and then maybe 2 or 3 little point lights at the back just to add a little bit of rim lighting and just help some of these edges catch, so it gives it a bit of contrast to the darker background. To me, that looks kind of cool. Okay, so let's just quickly save, and let's go to our layout. And I'm just going to quickly drag through here till I get a section that I think looks cool. Render and render image, and let's see what it looks like. And this is also where we're going to see the optics denoiser kind of kick in and do its magic. Now you can see here we do have that kind of depth of field effect going on because we have that enabled in our camera, and it's actually looking at the position of the empty. If you feel like it's too soft in the focus in certain areas and too sharp in others, that's going to be a matter of adjusting that empty there. But having the camera also tracking that empty kind of gives you advantage of also having your sharp point always in the middle of the camera, if that's what you're going for, which is kind of what I was going for. Some people might not want that to be how it's animated, but here you can see we have a rendered shot, and that's what our animation is going to look like. So I think this looks pretty cool. As a kind of like an abstract kind of concept, and the noise here and the grain is pretty minimal, and the denoiser I think does a pretty good job at it. But yeah, so if you're happy with it, make sure to save, and you know how to export a video. Just go to your output settings, go to your output folder, select anywhere you want. For me, it's going to be the desktop. File format, you can simply make that an FFmpeg video, or you can do image sequences and compile them in another software like Adobe After Effects if you want to, but for me, I'm just going to go with a video format, and your encoder is completely up to you. I like to go with an MP4. I think it's quite stable. It does a good job and it's not the highest quality format, but if there are other ones to choose from, completely up to you. And you can add audio in here. There are audio or video codecs for your audio down here. So you can see audio codecs, and there are some more settings here of quality. Mess around with that if you want. For me, I'm just gonna leave it as the default. Make sure to save, and now if you go render, any render animation, it should render out an MP4 to that selected destination. Okay, so I've already done that, so I'm not gonna do it now. But if you guys have gotten this far, please make sure to make this thing here. And if you want some more stuff that I do, you can check me out on Skillshare. There'll be some links to that in the description below. I cover things in a little bit more depth, a little bit more beginner friendly. And the cool thing is Skillshare allows you to have assets and blend stages that I can upload because it has that feature. So with every course I do, I kind of add all the different stages and the different blend files so you can follow along with the class and you can kind of do your own projects. And it's just a little bit more hands-on, a little bit more slower paced, and has a few more resources. But that's something you can check out if you get the time and you want to do it. That's all in the description below. And I also have these blend files here on my Patreon, which you guys can also check out. So thank you for watching this Blender video. I hope you guys have learned something as always, and I hope it's been informative. And I'll see you guys next time for another Blender tutorial.